which Sahabi looked the most like the Prophet ﷺ. So you have to remember some names that we covered. There are certain people that resembled, that had Shabah of the Prophet ﷺ, they resembled the Prophet ﷺ most. So who can name some names? Ja'far radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The first person is Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Ja'far, very beautifully, the Prophet ﷺ said, Ashbahta khulqi wa khalqi. That you resemble my khuluqi wa khalqi. You resemble my character and you resemble my creation. You resemble me the most in how you look and how you act. What a compliment. And the Prophet ﷺ sent him as the ambassador to Najashi, to Abyssinia. What better representation of the Prophet ﷺ than his cousin, who resembled him most in his looks and in his character, in his khuluq and in his khalq, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So first you have Ja'far. Who else do you have? Mus'ab ibn Umayr. So I'm going to hold Mus'ab off for a bit, inshallah. Let's start only with the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Alright, so only with the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So first you have Ja'far. Who else from the family of the Prophet ﷺ looked like him? Not necessarily. He's not listed min Shabih Nabi ﷺ from someone who looked like the Prophet ﷺ. Anyone else? It wasn't too long ago. Al-Hasan wal-Husayn. May Allah be pleased with them. Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu from above, Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu from below. Right? So Al-Hasan resembled the face of he looked so much like the Prophet ﷺ that you have the famous narration where Abu Bakr picks him up radiallahu anhu and throws him into the air and he says, you look more like your grandfather sallallahu alayhi wasallam than your father Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Al-Hasan wal-Husayn. So you have Ja'far, Al-Hasan wal-Husayn, and there is one more from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. We covered him. He's so interesting. He was one of the most interesting characters we covered. Anyone remember? Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith. Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith. If you go back, we did a lecture on Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He gets lost because people think you're talking about Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, the very famous Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ who looked exactly like him, and he was the Prophet ﷺ's best friend growing up. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was so hurt, remember, by his abstaining from Islam. And initially when the Prophet ﷺ came back, he didn't want to look at him. He was so hurt by him, right, because of how much he hurt the Prophet ﷺ. So he came to the Prophet ﷺ begging for forgiveness and stood with the Prophet ﷺ in Hunayn, and the Prophet ﷺ was so happy to have him back. Like imagine your best friend